Chapter 8. The Syntax. The first thing I learned about the syntax was that it had weather, not programmed weather, not the pulse's curated rotations of petrichor and citrus and lavender, dispensed through ceiling vents on a schedule optimized for aggregate emotional output. Real weather. Unpredictable, unmanaged, nobody asked for this weather. It was cold, a damp, seeping cold that came up through the ground and settled into my uniform like it owned the place. My luster-standard clothes, designed for a climate-controlled city where the temperature never deviated more than 2 degrees from optimal comfort, were suddenly laughably inadequate, like wearing a paper bag in a rainstorm. Cale noticed. He didn't say anything, just shrugged off one of his outer layers, a heavy poncho thing stitched together from what looked like old cable insulation and woven copper thread, and tossed it to me without breaking stride. "Don't thank me," he said. "It smells terrible, but it holds heat." He was right on both counts. The poncho smelled like burned rubber and damp metal, and something faintly organic that I couldn't identify. It was also the warmest thing I'd ever worn. The cable insulation trapped body heat in a way that luster fabrics, for all their adaptive micro-threading, couldn't match. It was crude, effective, made by someone who understood cold, not as a data point, but as a thing that could kill you. I pulled it tighter and followed Cale through the gap between the server towers. The passage was narrow, barely wide enough for 2 people to walk abreast, and Cale didn't slow down to accommodate me. He moved through the dark with the easy confidence of someone who'd been navigating this terrain since childhood, stepping over tangles of exposed cable, ducking beneath low-hanging data vines, placing his feet on stable ground without looking, like the landscape was a sentence he'd memorized. I stumbled constantly. The ground here wasn't flat. It wasn't anything consistent. In some places it was compacted earth, actual soil, dark and loamy, shot through with glowing threads of fibre-optic root systems. In others it was bare metal, the exposed chassis of ancient server banks, their surfaces oxidized to a deep orange-brown, slippery with condensation. In others still, it was something I had no word for, a spongy, semi-translucent material that gave slightly under my weight and glowed brighter where I stepped, like the ground was registering my footprints. "Don't step on the bright patches," Cale said, without turning around. "Why?" "They're memory pools. Step on one and you'll see someone else's deleted files. A guy last month stepped on a big one and spent 4 hours reliving a stranger's childhood birthday party. Couldn't stop crying." I sidestepped a particularly luminous patch and nearly tripped over a coil of cable as thick as my thigh. "How far is it?" I asked. "How far is what?" "Wherever we're going." Cale glanced back. The amber glow of his goggles caught the bioluminescence and threw strange warm shadows across his face. "We're already there, Zero. We've been there since you landed. The syntax isn't a place you travel to. It's a place you're in. Everything down here, the towers, the tunnels, the pools, the rain, it's all one system, one organism." He tapped the nearest server tower as he passed. The metal hummed. "Think of it like this. The luster is the screen, the pretty interface, the thing people see and touch and believe is real. The syntax is the code underneath, the engine, the part that actually runs the world. And people live down here. People survive down here. There's a difference. Up there, you live because the system lets you. Down here, you survive because you figured out how." He paused at a junction where the passage split into 3 branches. Each one looked identical to me, dark, narrow, glowing. Cale didn't hesitate. He took the left fork. "You'll learn the difference fast, or you won't, and then you'll be dead, and it'll be someone else's problem." "That's comforting." "I'm not here to comfort you, Zero. I'm here to keep you alive long enough to be useful." The word landed like a stone in my stomach. Useful. Not valued, not seen, not welcomed. Useful. In the luster, I was invisible. In the syntax, I was a tool. I wasn't sure which was worse, but I kept following, because the alternative was standing still in the dark, and I'd done enough of that for one lifetime. The passage widened, then it opened. I stopped walking. I couldn't help it. My legs simply refused to carry me forward until my brain had processed what my eyes were seeing, and my brain was taking its time because what my eyes were seeing was impossible. A cavern. No, bigger than a cavern. A space. A vast vertical space that extended upward and outward beyond what I could measure, carved from the bedrock between the luster's foundation and whatever lay beneath it. The walls were server towers, thousands of them stacked and fused and intergrown, forming a cylinder of ancient hardware that rose hundreds of feet on all sides. Their indicator lights, millions of them blinking in those slow asynchronous rhythms, turned the walls into a galaxy, a constellation of dying machines, still breathing, still signalling, still stubbornly on, despite being buried under a civilization that had forgotten they existed. And suspended within this vertical galaxy, connected by bridges of braided cable and platforms of repurposed circuit boards, and walkways carved from the chassis of decommissioned servers, a city. Not a luster city, not clean lines and adaptive surfaces and programmable skies. This was something rougher, rawer, something that had been built by hand over years, by people who had no algorithm to tell them where the walls should go. The structures were asymmetric, organic, imperfect, houses made from hollowed-out server cabinets, their doors cut with plasma torches, their windows covered with translucent sheets of salvaged display glass that glowed faintly with residual data. Market stalls built on platforms of compressed circuit boards, draped with fabrics woven from stripped cable. Walkways that spiraled upward along the tower walls, some wide enough for 3 people, others barely a foothold, all of them worn smooth by years of use. And people, everywhere, people, dozens, maybe hundreds, moving along the walkways, clustering on the platforms, leaning from the doorways of their server cabinet homes. They wore clothes like Kale's, layered, salvaged, heavy with the textures of repurposed technology. Some carried tools I didn't recognize, modified hardware, jury-rigged electronics, things that looked like they'd been invented from desperation and refined by necessity. A woman on a nearby platform was soldering something to a piece of curved metal, sparks cascading over the edge like tiny orange stars. A group of kids, actual kids, younger than me, chased each other across a swaying cable bridge, laughing with the specific wild laughter of children who have never been told that their fun is a social friction vector. No wristbands, no value scores, no ambient scent, no algorithmic matching, no pulse, just people, living in the guts of the machine. Kale stopped beside me and let me stare. For the first time since I'd met him, the smirk was gone. In its place was something quieter, older, the expression of someone showing you the thing they love most and watching your face to see if you understand. "This is Null City," he said. "Population, about 300, give or take. Everyone here is like you. Ghosts, zeros. People the algorithm couldn't read, so it threw them away." He spread his arms. "And we built this, from the scraps, from the deleted data and the decommissioned hardware, and the stuff the luster couldn't be bothered to properly destroy. It's..." I searched for the word. Beautiful felt too small. Impossible felt redundant. Everything down here was impossible. "How long has this been here?" "Longer than the luster." That's what they don't tell you up there. The syntax isn't some byproduct of the system. It's older. The original network, the first iteration of the global infrastructure. It's all still down here, running, barely but running. The luster was built on top of it, like putting new paint on a house with a basement full of ghosts. He paused, which, now that I say it out loud, is exactly what it is. A sound drifted up from below, music, not the Pulse's engineered ambient compositions. Something acoustic, imprecise, a stringed instrument played by human fingers that didn't always hit the right note, producing a melody that wandered and hesitated and doubled back on itself. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. Who plays music down here? I asked. Anyone who wants to. No algorithm, no optimization, just sound. Cale shrugged. Most of it's terrible. That's the point. I stood on the edge of the cavern and let the scale of it settle into me. 300 people. A whole civilization, thriving in the space between the ones and zeros. The luster had been managing every second of my existence for 15 years, deciding what I ate, what I heard, what I smelled, who I was allowed to know, and beneath it, invisible and unindexed and stubbornly alive, this had been here. This messy, imperfect, real place. I thought about my mother, sitting in our housing unit right now, maybe eating her gold-lit meal and reviewing her data hygiene queue, not knowing where I was, not knowing there was a where to be. My mum, I said, she doesn't know a lot of things, Cale said. His voice wasn't cruel, just factual. The voice of someone who'd had this conversation before with other new arrivals and had learned that kindness sometimes meant not softening the truth. Nobody up there does. That's the whole design. You can't miss what you don't know exists. But she'll worry. The pulse will flag my absence. They'll do what they always do, Zero. They'll smooth it over. They'll repair the continuity. By tomorrow morning, your mother's memory of tonight will be, he searched for the word, adjusted. The pulse won't delete you from her mind. That's too messy. It'll just make your absence feel normal, expected. Like you went to a night program or a special integration session. She'll feel a little uneasy, maybe, a little hollow. But she won't panic. The system doesn't allow panic. Panic is a bug. The wet cement feeling was back, sitting in my ribs, heavier than before. That's monstrous, I whispered. Yeah, Cale said, it is. He let the silence hold. Down below, the stringed instrument found a phrase it liked and played it again, softer this time. A breeze moved through the cavern, actual moving air, driven by temperature differentials rather than filtration systems, carrying the smell of metal and moss and the faint, sharp sweetness of ozone. Then Cale turned to me. The smirk was back, but tempered now, gentler at the edges. Come on, there's something you need to see before I take you in. Something that'll make the rest of this make sense. He led me to a stairway carved into the server tower wall, rough steps cut from old chassis plates, each one slightly different from the last. Some tilted, some narrow, all of them real, in a way that the adaptive flooring of the luster had never been. We climbed. Up past cable bridges and glowing windows, and the sounds of 300 people cooking, arguing, repairing, laughing, living. Up past the highest platforms of Null City, where the structures thinned and the indicator lights grew sparse. Up into the dark space above the settlement, where the ancient servers gave way to bare rock and compacted earth and the tangled roots of data cables, so old their insulation had petrified into something like stone. We climbed until there was nowhere left to climb. Cale stopped on a ledge, a small flat outcrop of server chassis, bolted to the rock, barely large enough for 2 people. He sat on the edge, dangled his legs over the drop. 300 feet below, Null City glowed like a handful of embers in the dark. Sit, he said. I sat, my legs shook, from the climb, from everything. Cale reached up and pressed his palm against the rock above us. The luster's foundation is about 2 meters above our heads, he said. The composite, the wiring, the structural grid, all of it. The floor of your school, the promenade, your mother's kitchen, 2 meters. Okay, but that's not the ceiling of the syntax. He pointed to the wall behind us. I turned. There, cut into the rock and hidden behind a curtain of petrified cable, was a narrow fissure, barely wide enough to squeeze through sideways. The syntax goes deeper than the luster's foundation, but it also goes higher. In a few places, rare ones, old ones, the original infrastructure broke through to the surface. Before the luster was built, before the dome. He pulled the curtain of cable aside. Cool air rushed through the fissure, not the damp cave air of the syntax, and not the filtered air of the luster. Something else. Something I had no reference for. It smelled like nothing the pulse had ever generated. Sharp, clean, enormous. "Go through," Cale said. "What's on the other side?" He looked at me. The amber goggles, the scarred knuckles, the crooked smile that never fully committed to either side of his face. And in his eyes, beneath the swagger and the survival instinct and the practiced toughness of a boy who'd grown up in the wreckage, something fragile, something that looked, just for a second, like the same thing I'd felt pressing my hand against the value board night after night. Hope. "The truth," he said. "Go see it." I turned sideways, squeezed through the fissure. The rock pressed against my chest and my back, simultaneously, cold and rough and real, and I pushed forward, inch by inch, until the passage opened and I stumbled out onto a surface I'd never stood on before. Grass, dead grass, brown, sparse, brittle beneath my shoes. But grass, growing in thin patches between cracks in old concrete, real concrete, weathered, crumbling. I looked up. The dome was gone. No, that's wrong. The dome was there, I could see it, a massive curved structure of steel and composite and LED panelling, stretching across the horizon, glowing faintly with the peach and violet light of the luster's manufactured evening sky. From the outside, it looked like what it was, a shell, a lid, a sealed container placed over a city to keep the weather out and the data in. I was outside it, standing on the outer surface of the world, the real surface, and above me, for the first time in my life, I saw the sky. The real sky. It was grey, not soft grey, not silver, not any of the 12 aesthetic variations of grey that the Pulse used for its contemplative weather settings. It was the grey of concrete left in the rain for 100 years, heavy, low. The clouds, real clouds, not LED projections, hung so close I felt like I could reach up and push my fingers into them. They moved, slowly, massively, with a weight and indifference that no algorithm could replicate. The wind, actual wind, not ventilation currents, hit my face and kept going, not caring whether it improved my emotional output or disrupted my social metrics. It was cold, it smelled like distance. There were no stars, no sun, no colour, just grey stretching forever in every direction, and beneath it, the dark silhouette of the dome, the luster, the only city I'd ever known, squatting on the landscape like a snow globe, sitting on an empty table. It was the ugliest, most desolate, most magnificent thing I'd ever seen. I don't know how long I stood there. Long enough for the cold to find its way through the cable poncho and settle into my bones. Long enough for the wind to make my eyes water. Long enough to understand, at a level deeper than thought, that every sunrise I'd ever seen was a lie, and every sunset, and every star, and every perfectly calibrated shift from peach to violet to deep indigo, all of it, a screen, a filter, a beautiful, beautiful prison. Cale squeezed through the fissure and stood beside me. He didn't speak. He let me have it. The grief, the awe, the vertigo of seeing the truth for the first time. When I finally found my voice, it came out raw, stripped, like the wind had scoured it clean of everything that wasn't essential. How long has it been like this? As long as anyone remembers. The luster was built to keep people from seeing it. The pulse was built to keep people from wanting to see it. He pulled his goggles down over his eyes. The amber lenses cut the grey glare. The world out here is broken, Zero, badly. The climate collapsed decades before the luster went up. That's why they built the dome. That's why they built the pulse, to manage what was left of humanity inside a controlled environment while everything outside. He gestured at the grey, the vast, empty, cloud-choked grey. Died. Is it dead? Cale was quiet for a moment. The wind filled the silence. No, he said. Dying, slowly, but not dead. There's still soil out there under the concrete, still water, still seeds in the ground, waiting for someone to give a damn. He looked at me. But that's a problem for later. Right now, you've got a more immediate one. Which is, you're the root code, Silas. The pulse needs you to reboot. The syntax needs you to not reboot, and both sides are going to tear you apart trying to get what they want. He turned back toward the fisher. But first you need to eat something that isn't a grey square, and you need to meet the people who've been waiting for you to fall through the floor. He disappeared into the rock. I stood alone on the surface of the real world for one more breath. The wind pushed against me. The grey sky pressed down. Somewhere inside the glowing dome, my mother was eating dinner in a kitchen that smelled like whatever the pulse thought would make her happy. The sky was not a dome. It was not beautiful. It was not optimized. It was real, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever felt.